Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Prabhu, मैं तुम्हारा तुम्हारा. Feeling the attunement to God and the Gurus, let us carry forward the proceedings of the day. And a big thank you to all the chanters for this beautiful, uplifting experience. We are delighted today to welcome once again Nayaswami Jyotishji, Nayaswami Deviji, all the Nayaswamis from across India who have blessed this occasion today. To have you, Ishanji and Piyaji, our monks, our family of Guru Bhais, and every single soul who's present here today. We are truly grateful for your presence. As we invoke the presence of the divine, so that we may open our hearts and minds for the wisdom that we are all about to receive. Let us start today's day by lighting the sacred lamp. May I request Jyotishji, Deviji, Nayaswami Dr. Aditya, Nayaswami Dhyana ji, and Piyaji to please come forward and light the lamp. Thank you, Payal, and thank you to our spiritual leaders for not just lighting up this lamp and illuminating this room, but actually illuminating our lives with your peace, your example, and your wisdom. We'd like you to please join us on the stage. Thank you. A big thank you to that choir for creating that harmonious vibration and drawing us into the joy within. Now we move to the most awaited part of the day as we hear from Nayaswami Jyotishji and Nayaswami Deviji on this beautiful topic, a life with God and Gurus.
Good morning, friends. It's a great joy to be back here, not only in India, but in Gurgaon. We've spent so many years here. We used to live here with Swamiji many years ago and have wonderful memories of our time together. It is a great joy to be with all of you and to see how beautifully the spirit has grown over the years. We saw a video of the volunteers working last night. Many of them worked through the whole night in order to prepare to make things beautiful for all of us together. You know, this topic of living with God and gurus, it's a very important topic for those of us who are seeking God. Master started the autobiography of the yogi with the statement that the characteristic tendency of Indian culture has long been the search for eternal verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship. And then he ended his life with these words, where Ganges, woods, and Himalayan caves breathe God. My body is blessed. It touched the sod. And the sanctity of India, the sanctity of the great teachings, because no land itself is more special than any other land. But what makes a land special, what makes a land sacred, as India is sacred, and India is the guru of the world, what makes it that way is that there have been great souls that lived here, those who lived with God, those who lived with the guru, with the consciousness of the guru. What does it mean to live with God? What does it mean to live with guru? It's not like moving in with your relatives and living with them. God is everywhere. God is just as much in this room as he is up on Hiranyaloka, where Sri Yukteswar is. Where is the guru? Where does the guru live? We just came very recently from Italy, Assisi, and then we went to Spain, and we were in very a number of sacred places in Spain where great saints had lived, including Yogananda. Yogananda spent a lifetime there as one of the great kings of Spain, Fernando. And so what does it mean? He lived that life there. He lived a life as during the Mahabharata with Krishna as Arjuna. He lived a life more recently in the last century. You know, it was yesterday in 1920 that he started his great mission, that he came to America in order to bring these great teachings to the West. And so the living with God, living with Guru is a matter of consciousness. It is not a matter of place, nor is it a matter of time, nor is it a matter of anything. What that means for you and me is that God is in this room just as much as he will ever be anywhere. There really is no time and space. It is all consciousness. So living with God does not mean anything other than us in our consciousness choosing to live with God. Yogananda, someone said, Master, not getting the concept that Master was everywhere. He said, Master, what are we going to do when you're gone, when you leave this earth? And Yogananda replied, those who think me near, to those who think me near, I will be near. To those who think God near, God is near. To those who think God is far away, God keeps his distance. And to those who never think of God at all, then God is just maybe a mythology. Maybe the atheists of this world believe that he's nothing but a non-existent fantasy of people trying to make themselves feel better about life. But is that the reality? If it were only a matter of philosophy, why would one philosophy that God exists be better than another philosophy God does not exist? They both seem equally possible. What makes it real and what makes it provable is that great saints, especially in India, great souls, have experienced, had the voice of God has finally arrived. The great saints, the great sages of India have had the actual living experience of knowing that God exists. The great saints, not only of India, we visited the place of Saint Teresa in Avila, Saint John of the Cross in Segovia. They too experienced God. So it is not dependent on time. It's not dependent on place. It's dependent on consciousness. So living with God and gurus means that we have to get our consciousness aware enough. We have to expand it enough. We have to be perceptive enough to be able to feel the living presence of God and gurus. Why should we do that? Why, what good does it do? Is it going to make us better at our job? Is it going to make us rich? Is it going to make us famous? Is it going to help us achieve worldly goals? Well, in fact, it will help us achieve those goals if that's what we want. One time, Yogananda's chief disciple, who was a very wealthy businessman, he said to Master, now this is a great saint that's making this challenge. He said to Yogananda, all of these teachings, they work on the spiritual realm, but they don't really work in the realm of business. Do they? And Yogananda said, oh, yes, they do. And so the disciple said, well, I'm a practical businessman. You're going to have to prove that to me. Same kind of challenge as when Yogananda's brother challenged him about going to Brindaban. So this man, Rajarsi Janakananda, challenged Master, prove that God can come into the world of business. So Yogananda went and he said, first of all, he said, I'll show you within 2 weeks, I will earn $5,000. This was in the height of the Depression. So it would be like today, saying, give me 2 weeks and I'll earn $500,000. It was a real challenge. So Yogananda went and he meditated. And in that deep meditation, images of houses started coming to him. Well, it wasn't enough that just the images came. He had to make it practical because he was bringing God, bringing the presence of God, living with God in the practical world. And so after meditation, from this deep intuition, he went and he got the newspaper and he started looking at houses for sale. And so he said to Rajasi, I want to buy these houses. And Rajasi said, that's a terrible idea. The market has been going down and down and down. We're going to lose all our money. Master said, I don't care. This is what God told me. So they bought some houses. The market turned around. 2 weeks later, they sold them for a $5,000 profit. And Yogananda said, see, living with God works in the practical world also. It works in all worlds, but if we only want the relationship with God in order to make money, there are other ways to make money. There are other, maybe more efficient ways of getting rich. One time, one of the disciples, a disciple to be, came to Master and he said, all religion tells me is that I can't do this and I can't do that and I can't do this. What do you have to say for me? Yogananda said, do you like to smoke? He could smell it on him. The man said, yes. He said, you may continue. Do you like to drink whiskey? Yes, I do. You may continue. The man, of course, was shocked. He expected quite the opposite. Do you like to play around at night? Yes, I do. You may continue. And the man was very surprised, but Yogananda said, but I'll tell you this, if you follow these teachings, the desire to do those things will fall away. So we have tendencies in us that are self-destructive. If we follow the teachings of God, it raises our consciousness to the point where with higher consciousness, the desire to do self-destructive behavior begins to fall away. The desire to live a life that is stressful, that is out of balance, that begins to fall away. The desire to harm other people, to harm the environment, all of that falls away. And moreover, if we live with God, if we live these teachings, these great teachings that have emanated from the ancient times in India, but have been restated in a modern, practical way by these great gurus on the altar here, whose job was to bring these teachings in the proper way, in the way that works for this age of Dwapara Yuga that we're just entering into. If we live according to these great teachings, we're going to find that everything in our life works better. Our relationships work better. Our businesses work better. Our health is better. Everything improves if we are making the right attunement with God and Guru. But it really is not a matter of anything other than raising our own level of consciousness. Swami Kriyananda said that one would think, I mean, many of us here are disciples of Yogananda. And many of us think, oh, if only I were alive in those times, if only I could have lived with Yogananda. Swami Kriyananda said it was not that easy. Yogananda treated everyone as if they were a saint. And he said it was hard living up to his expectations, because you had to keep your energy uplifted all the time. I have to tell a little something on my wife here. When Swami Kriyananda gave her the name, she was just sitting in a restaurant, and Swami came up to her and said, "I'm going to give you the name Devi. It means Divine Mother, and you'd better live up to it." So, and she has, thank goodness. But living with the consciousness of the Guru means that we have to raise our consciousness. As I said, God and Guru are in this room right now. Why can't we see them? Why can't we feel them? Because our consciousness is not yet subtle enough. If our consciousness were subtle enough, we could see them. One time in the middle of a talk, Yogananda said, "I rarely say something like this in a lecture, but I'm going to tell you the experience that I have in living." He said, "I see all of you in your physical forms. I see you have a height, a width, a depth, 3 dimensions." But he said, "I also see simultaneously an entire other dimension, an entire other world that has no dimension. It's just pure consciousness. It's pure light." And he said, "I actually live more in that world than I do in the world of 3 dimensional entities that are perceivable by the senses." So what he was really saying is that he lives in a world of consciousness, in a world of deep awareness. And if we want to perceive God, if we want to truly live with God and Guru, we have to raise our consciousness in order to be able to perceive subtler realms than can be perceived by the senses. Because God has so created creation that the senses give complete evidence of what exists, and yet that evidence is false evidence. Really, all our senses are doing is perceiving vibrations. The sound that you're hearing are nothing but vibrations. The sight that you're seeing with are nothing but vibrations. Our senses are perceiving those, feeding them into our minds, and our minds are interpreting those as some kind of a existence that is outside of ourself. But it's all just a play of consciousness. And if we're going to truly live with God and Guru, then we have to work to raise our consciousness, or to make our consciousness broader and more subtle, so that we can perceive these realities. How do we do that? The primary way is through meditation. Why? Meditation, Yogananda said, is simply deep concentration on God or on one of the different aspects of God. And so as we withdraw our energy from the senses that produce this delusional world, as we withdraw that energy within, we begin to perceive subtler realities, broader realities. We perceive the existence of God. And ultimately, we don't perceive the existence of God. Maybe at first we do, as God outside of ourselves, oh Divine Mother. Maybe we see a vision. Maybe we feel the presence of God outside of ourselves. But ultimately, what that leads to is the perception that nothing except God exists. And we don't exist except an extension of God. And in that great perception, which the sages of India have had and have passed down the means of attaining that, That's what makes India so great. What makes India sacred is that these teachings have been passed down over centuries, over millennium. The way to achieve that consciousness that perceives nothing but God. And when we can perceive nothing but God, how can we live with anyone else but God? It's all one consciousness. But what holds us back is we still have yet, we're on a, one might say, a long road of evolving consciousness. And we're born in body after body after body, learning our lessons, gradually expanding our consciousness. The first and foremost requirement is that we want that consciousness. Why do most people not achieve it? They don't want it. Yogananda, Swami Kriyananda, our teacher of a lifetime, he went to his family and he explained these beautiful teachings that he'd received from his guru. He was filled with enthusiasm. And his brother looked at him and he said, frankly, I don't care. And so unless you want these teachings, unless you want this upliftment of consciousness, God, who is you, just waits until you do want it. But gradually, by experience, by seeking, by reaching out for something, thinking happiness lies outside of ourselves, by reaching for that, and finally achieving it and finding, oh, that didn't give me happiness. Yogananda said that the life takes on a sense of anguishing monotony. And in that anguishing monotony, where do we turn? We turn inward. And when we turn inward, that's where we will find God, because God is consciousness. Everything outside seems to be other than consciousness. Inward, we are more perceptively aware that it's pure consciousness. And that inward search will lead us to subtler and subtler realms. But just as Yogananda, perceiving all of those houses, then had to do something in the practical world, as well as meditation. This path that Yogananda brought, he said, is a balance between meditation and service, selfless service. So during the times that we aren't meditating, we should be serving God. Doesn't matter your job, what kind of form of service you give, as long as your service, whatever you're doing, you're offering it as your way of giving your energy to God and gurus. So if we are able to balance those two together, meditation and service, and do it actively with great intensity and stick with it, then our consciousness will rise and we will feel too that we are blessed to have touched the sod that contains these great teachings. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jyotish. That was wonderful. Hello, friends. As Jyotish said earlier, we are so happy to be here. You know, just personally speaking, we have the opportunity to serve our guru by teaching in many places in the world, but there's no place like India. It's like everyone else you have to translate, and I'm not speaking of language, I'm speaking of understanding. But with the Indian Guru Bhais, brothers and sisters, you understand even without us speaking at all. So it makes our job much, much easier, I have to say. So our theme, living with God and Guru. As Jyotish said, it's very interesting. The fact came up on our computers yesterday, September 19th, 1920, 105 years ago to one day minus, a young man was arriving on a boat from India heading for Boston Harbor. He was a man in his mid-20s, traveling alone. His name on the ship's register of passengers was Mukunda Lal Ghosh. And he landed in Boston Harbor. The ship he was on was called the City of Sparta. And that was significant because Sparta was a city of great warriors, selfless, courageous, powerful. And so was this young man who we now know as Paramahansa Yogananda or Gurudeva. And he landed in Boston Harbor. And it's also significant because Boston Harbor in American history was one of the centers of the American Revolution, overthrowing the British colonial rule. And Yogananda started another kind of revolution. He started a revolution of consciousness. And he was invited by a spiritual organization, Congress of Religious Liberals, as the representative of India to give a talk there. And his first talk that he gave on American soil was the science of religion. And he said later, Americans were calling for a technique, devotion. They had sincerity, but they didn't have a technique. So the great masters of India, Babaji, Lahiri Mahashaya, Sri Yukteswar, they sent him here to America to start a revolution. And so he did. And if that young man had not put his foot on American soil, none of us would be in this room today. Think about it. The center would not exist. Ananda India Sangha would not exist because one man had the courage to let God guide him. And the history of his time in America is astonishing. For 10 years, he called them his spiritual campaigns, going back and forth, lecturing in some cities, starting small, maybe 100 people. But by the end of those spiritual campaigns, he was lecturing to thousands of people in the biggest cities in America, New York and Chicago and Los Angeles and throughout the country, to thousands of people, changing the consciousness of America, because the mission of these great gurus, of whom Yogananda was a representative, was to unite East and West, to show the science of religion, to unite religion and science, and to show the underlying unity of all religions. It's the same God. It's the same underlying truths. And to that end, Yogananda wrote commentaries on all of the great scriptures of the world. Of course, the Bhagavad Gita, but the Bible, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, some reference to the Old Testament, and he was showing the essence teachings in all world religions the same. But now moving here today on a journey of discipleship, because Yogananda was a great warrior, but he was also a great poet. And his poetry is some of the most beautiful and eloquent spiritual poetry ever written. And so we start on this journey of discipleship, living with God and Guru. And to this end, Yogananda has a beautiful poem called When I Am Only a Dream. And the poem starts, I come to tell you all of him and the way to encase him in your bosom and the discipline which brings his grace. This is living with the Guru, holding the devotion in your heart, disciplining yourself through sadhana, through yogic techniques, but also in your daily life, how to live with him in whatever you're doing. He showed the way. Jyotish gave some examples, but his teachings were so practical. When you read the talks he gave, he was just tuning into the needs of the American consciousness at that time. One, for example, how Indian teachings can help American businessman, how to find your true life companion, how to have radiant health, how to have success in everything you do, on and on, very practical, so that people could feel I'm living with my guru when I'm serving my family, when I'm at work. He is with me, and it's not separate. Once Swami was doing some traveling and he was giving some lectures. When we say Swami, it's Swami Kriyananda. I met him when I was 22 years old. Jyotish was 24. And he was our teacher till he passed away in 2013. And we were fortunate to be able to spend a great deal of time with him. But once Swami was giving some lectures in Canada, and he was staying in the home of a wealthy businessman. And the businessman said a little proudly, I go to work every day, but my real life begins when I come home and I go into my meditation room. And Swami said, that's a shame. Why are you living the rest of your life with that consciousness? And the man was shocked. But he understood then that you can't divide your life. Living with God and Guru is 24/7, 12 months of the year, a whole lifetime. And I'll tell you, I've been on the path for a lot of years. It gets better and better. And God's presence is more and more tangible. And you see, when you try to live with Guru, God and Guru, they join you, they live with you, and they show you their presence in the littlest things and the seemingly most trivial. One time I had been reading autobiography of a yogi, and it describes Babaji as having bronze colored hair. And I was wondering, what would that look like? I was in Palo Alto, California at the time, and I was thinking trying to visualize Babaji. Just then we drove by an Indian restaurant in the city. And there was a woman, she was in the parking lot, but she had bronze colored hair. And I said, oh, that's what it looks like. Just little moments in your life that you think, did that really just happen? But it does. And it's the most thrilling experience to know we are not alone. There is a presence always with us, protecting us and guiding us. Protecting us. I could tell you so many examples of things that should have been tragic, death-threatening experiences. And through the grace of God and Guru, people were protected. There was a woman at Ananda, one of our great saints, who her car got stalled and somebody came to fix it and poured gasoline in the carburetor and it blew up in her face. Seva, for those of you who know her, was her name. And she had horrible 3rd-degree burns all over her face. They rushed her to the hospital. We went in the next day. And the doctors were saying, oh, you must be in terrible pain. She was unrecognizable, the burns on her face. But the doctor said, oh, you must be in terrible pain. Let me give you some pain medication. She said, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Her face healed without a scar. You would never have known. She had the karma to have that accident, but God was with her and she was protected. So that's living with the Guru. But now we're on a journey of discipleship. And the next stage is living for the Guru. And again, we have a poem of Yogananda. I have nothing to offer thee, for all things are thine. I grieve not that I cannot give. for nothing is mine. Thank God for technicians. So I'll go back. Let's start with the poem. It's called I Have Nothing to Offer Thee. I have nothing to offer thee, for all things are thine. I grieve not that I cannot give, for nothing is mine, nothing is mine. Here I lay at thy feet, O Lord, my limbs, my life, my thoughts, and my speech, for they are thine, they are thine. So living for the Guru is surrender, surrendering your life, whatever is asked of you, however hard it is. Just say, I give this to you, God. It's for you. All that befalls me, all that I own, it's all for you. And Swami Kriyananda, our teacher, he was not an easy teacher either, in the sense that he always asked more of us than we thought we could do. But then, as Master said, bite off more than you can chew and then chew it. And so when we just, once Swami was going to give some lectures in Los Angeles, and another woman and I were working at our office at Ananda Village, trying to get out a big mailing to, took a lot of energy for two of us to all the mailing lists. And then Swami drove up in his car and he said, oh, I've been invited to give a talk in Los Angeles. And we're going to have a group is coming. It's going to be wonderful. I'll give the talk. We're staying with friends. Then we may go to Disneyland. It'll be wonderful. And I have room in the car for one of you. Who wants to go? And it meant one of us would say, I'll stay and finish the job. The other one would go. I knew the other woman did not have the inner strength to say, I will stay. So I said, I will stay, Swamiji. And he blessed me. And it was that night I had a very, very blessed experience. But that was the test. Will you give up all the world offers that seems to make you happy? Or will you say, God, I live for you. Everything is for you. I don't expect anything in return. But when we stop expecting anything in return and just give everything in selfless surrender, that's when the floodgates of divine grace open up and we just receive richness and a grace beyond anything we thought was possible. So living with God, living for God. But the last step of discipleship is living in God. And Master again has the poem. This is a poem, When I Am Only a Dream. And it, it concludes with these words. When you know, as I know now, that you are not but a dream in the mind of the Heavenly Father, then we shall both be awake forever in God. And so finally, to live in God and Guru, feel that your thoughts are being guided by them inwardly. Your actions are an expression of their consciousness. And Swami Kriyananda said towards the end of his life, he was a lifelong disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. But Master told him, you have a great work to do. And then this Rajasi Janakananda, the disciple Jyotish mentioned, said later after Master passed, Master has a great work to do through you, and he will give you the strength to do it. And so it proved to be. He did create a great work. This center in Gurgaon, in Panchil, in Delhi, in Puri, Pune, in all the centers in India, Chennai, Chandigarh, Ludhiana, all across India, all across Europe, all across America. It's the work of Master flowing through one soul who lived in him. And Swami said at one point towards the end of his life, I no longer can tell where Swami Kriyananda ends and Yogananda begins, because he was so living in him. And that's really our goal in life. It's not enough. I wish it were enough just to follow the teaching, practice techniques. That's only the beginning. That's living with God. Then there comes living for God, where as we begin to feel, we get hints of his presence within. We say, Lord, I just want to give you everything. There's nothing I want to hold back. This life is for you. And then finally, to live in God, to feel his grace with you all the time. There's a beautiful book I read some years ago by a Russian mystic. It was called The Way of the Pilgrim. And it was the story of a little humble peasant who heard there was a great way to find God. And that was simply to repeat the phrase, he was a Christian, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. And he went to a priest in the church and he said, how do I do this? And the man said, the priest said, for 5 minutes every day, repeat, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. And so he did. A week went by, he went back to the priest. He said, now do it for half an hour every day. That's what he did. And you can assume the progression. Finally, he was doing it many hours a day. And then he didn't need to go back to the priest because he was feeling the presence of God with him. He was in God. And so this is the goal of the spiritual path. It's beyond technique. It's beyond any outward form. It's beyond culture or language. It's the ability to feel that God is with you in every moment. He is within you. You know, Yogananda said, my highest prayer is I will reason, I will, I will act, but guide thou my will, reason, and activity to the highest end in all things. And so this beautiful transition when we move from the sense of I, the little I, into the sense of the greater oneness with God. And Master concluded his beautiful poem, and I'll conclude with it too, with these simple words, a tiny bubble of laughter. I have become the sea of mirth itself. And that's our goal, my friends, to become the sea of mirth, the sea of joy, and not only for ourselves, but this world right now, so torn by hostility and violence and divisiveness. Let this bubble, this tiny bubble of laughter, as we merge with the sea of mirth itself, let the waves of the sea of mirth wash out beyond your awareness, beyond your physical reality, and touch and uplift the lives of people that you may never know. But one soul living in God, one soul holding up God's reality within them does more good for the world than all the speeches of famous people and powerful people. But the simple man or woman living with God, for God, in God, can change the world. God bless you.
Thank, thank you so much, Jyotishji. Thank you so much, Deviji. We are really blessed to have them with us. And now we know one more reason why, because they could help us so much in such a topic that is so dear to us, on not only being able to figure out a way how to live with God, but how to live in God and how to live for God as well. And we had done some homework to come up with a list of questions that we could have asked that we could have asked with you, Jyotishji and Deviji. But now, with your presence, with your consciousness, and as well with the way you told us about this topic, somehow there are no more questions. But since we had prepared them, we would still want to ask a few of them with you. So you transported us, right? Reminding us that 105 years back when Master went to the US to spread the teachings of Kriya Yoga out there. And then you also reminded us that God is here right now in us, with us. As Master had said that to those who think me near, I will be near. The question that we have to start with is how do we feel the presence of our gurus and our masters in our daily life when a lot of times, sorry, in our daily lives when a lot of times we have all kinds of challenges, um, especially when we are confronted with situations and people who are not on the spiritual path. How do we deal and how do we realize that even in this daily life, when we have our normal day to day challenges, how do we feel the presence of our masters and gurus and realize that yes, we are living with them in such situations?
Okay, good. The answer to this one is it's not a matter of of the presence of God not being there. It's just us being aware of it. And it starts by remembering to try to be aware of it. Because right now the sun is shining outside. How many of you were aware of the fact that the sun was shining outside 10 seconds ago? Probably no one. Your concentration is somewhere else. But as soon as you think, oh, is the sun shining? You look, oh, yes, the sun is shining. So it's like that with God. God's sunlight, his light is always shining on our life. All we have to do is remember to be aware of it. But when we get involved in difficulties in our minds, especially when we get upset or emotional or negative emotions are aroused, then it's hard to stay centered enough to ask the question, is God here? Is God here now? But we can train ourselves habitually to tune in to God. It's a very, very good practice to try to many times a day specifically ask God, how do I do this? How do I do this coding that I'm trying to do? I don't quite understand it. How do I calm my emotions? How do I act in such a way that people feel comfortable in my presence? If we tune in and ask God those questions, at first it won't seem that he's there, but gradually we'll find that God responds very specifically when we call on his presence to be there and to help us.
I'll also add another important quality is purity of heart. You know, I love to be around children because they're so open and the world hasn't made them put up walls yet. They just trust. And we have to learn to be like children again, where we trust that the Divine Mother, Heavenly Father is with us. I'll just tell a little story. We don't want to go on too long for each question. But while we were teaching and traveling in Italy, we went to a place where a great saint, Saint Joseph of Cupertino, where his body is entombed. And he was a very simple man. He lived in a monastery, but he just worked in the stables, shoveling cleaning up the stables for the horses. And he was just very simple. But so great was his consciousness that he would levitate. And when other people would come to visit him, he would take their hands and they would just rise into the air. And the Catholic Church didn't know what to do with him. So they locked him up in a monastery in a little room that he couldn't really get out of. But at one point, when he was still working in the stables, the other monks would kind of tease him because he was simple and they thought they were better than him. And one time they came and they said, "Oh, Brother Joseph, come, there's a cow flying in the sky." And he came running out to look, and they were laughing and laughing. What a fool he was to think that a cow could fly in the sky. And they were laughing and they said, "You fool, don't you know cows can't fly?" And he looked at them with great innocence and said, "I would rather think that a cow could fly, that my brother monks would lie to me." And they were so humbled by that because they felt the purity of his heart. And so life teaches us, unfortunately, to mistrust, to put up barriers, to be suspicious. But if we really want to feel God in our hearts, we have to break down those barriers, at least in our relationship with God, and trust and be like little children, that open and that just believing with faith that everything good would be happening.
Thank you so much, Deviji. Thank you, Jyotishji, as well. It's interesting how you bring us the answers which are so relevant and which we can test right away. That I also saw outside whether the sun is shining or not, and I realized, okay, we never looked at it. So thank you for the practical answers in such a deep topic as well. The next question that we had concerns our spiritual journey, and most of us here in this hall are here because we all are seeking God. So if we are in that process, then how do we realize and how do we ensure that God and our gurus keep helping us on the spiritual progress and we do not follow into our own internal delusions or perhaps distractions that otherwise we can be trapped into them through the world?
Okay, what?
Yeah, just a very thick.
Um, you know, I think it's so important. Remember, we were talking about living for God, and just to also with our spiritual efforts, don't meditate like a merchant. Well, I'll meditate this long, but then what are my results? I'll give you this. What do you give me? You just meditate. You just are devoted. You just chant, and you don't look for what comes. You just do it. And Master said the spiritual path, your sadhana is like planting seeds. If you plant seeds in the ground, if you keep digging them up to see if they're growing, nothing happens. But if you just let them in their own time, in their own way, take form, then with surrender, with faith, and then we feel the rewards. But our own spiritual progress is very hard to see, and in a way, it's better not to see it. You just offer your life to God, whatever He wants to give you in return of spiritual growth or blessings. That's His decision to make. But the most important thing is just selfless self-offering. And what comes after that is God's call.
Our job is to make the best effort that we can do. We can't control whether we're going to feel the presence of God or not. In fact, one of these great saints that we talked about. Saint Teresa of Avila said there were 4 levels of prayer. The first was contemplation. And in the level of prayer of contemplation, or we could substitute 4 levels of meditation. In contemplation, we have to make an effort. We have to keep trying and trying. She said that's the foundation for everything that follows. So we have to try. She said, the garden of our aspiration. In this level of prayer, it's as if we're lowering a bucket down into a deep well and pulling up with our strength that bucket full of water and pouring it on the plants. And she said it takes a lot of effort and a lot of concentration. The next level, she said, is quiet prayer. In quiet prayer, we simply are, the mind is no longer restless. The mind is no longer thinking that I'm making an effort. We're focused on just what we're doing. She said now it's as if there's a water wheel that's bringing up the water. The next is union, where you feel the union with God, the union with everything. And she said, in this, it's as if there's a stream watering our garden. And the final is ecstasy, where God comes to you. They're very similar to the stages of Patanjali, of pranayama, pratyahara, samyama, and finally samadhi. But she said the final 3 stages, our part is the first stage, making that effort. The final 3 stages come by God's grace. And so we have to do what we can do. But as Devi said, if we're like a merchant, well, I've given you this much effort, you have to come to me. God just waits until our attitude is right, until our karma is right, until the experiences of actual contact with God are right for us. Because if there's a sense of pride, a sense of ego involved, God can't come in where ego still exists. We have to let that wash away. And when it washes away through self-effort, then God comes in at his own time, at his own place, and gives us the experiences that the great saints talk about. But they don't experience it as ego, they experience it as a soul experiencing the presence of God.
Thank you so much once again, Jyotishji and Deviji. We have just 2 more questions, and the next one is related to the fact that being in India, all of us, most of us do grow in a very spiritual environment, definitely visiting temples, and there's a lot of devotion definitely to God. So we wanted to know, how does loving God and loving Guru complement each other, and is there any difference in the devotion that we have for God versus for the Guru?
Okay. That's a very good question. They all are, but that, Swami gave a very good explanation of the relationship between God and Guru. And he said, God is like a great power station generator. But that so much power is generated that if it went into our home directly, it would blow out the wires. So you need to step it down with transformers, they call it. And then from that lesser power, then we can receive. And so Swami said, God is like that great generating station, but the Guru comes and makes it, translates it, transforms it so that we can receive it. Because if God is here all the time, as we've been saying, does he teach us how to meditate? Does he give us techniques? Through the Guru, he does. And so the Guru is just the stepping down station. And Master, I mean, he was an avatar. fully realized soul for many lifetimes. And again, in his poem, God's Boatman, he said, I will come again and again, 1,000,000,000,000 times, as long as one stray brother is weeping by the wayside. What a promise. But Master came to bring us to step down and tuning into the consciousness of contemporary society. How can they understand it? What can they receive? And when people would say to Master, oh, so-and-so is your disciple, Master would say, I have no disciples. God is the guru. So he never took a personal role that, no, I am the guru, you are the disciple. He said, we're just disciples of God. And when people would touch his feet, as the custom, he would just go like that, like, Lord, I'm sending the energy to you, because it's from you that the energy comes. And so, in a way, it's such a beautiful expression of God's unconditional, infinite, personal love for us, that he sends the guru who can, even if he's in the body, if he's not in the body, as Jyotish said, if you think him near, he's near. And that God has sent his instruments in the form of true gurus, Satgurus, to be there for us and guide us. And when we're weeping in the darkness, their presence is always there. And so, as I say, it's such a powerful reminder of God's infinite love, that he would send his enlightened souls, his expressions to this world in the form of a guru. And so it's hard to visualize God, but it's much easier to look into Yogananda's eyes and see beyond the form and see God's infinite love and limitless consciousness. So loving Guru deepens our love for God.
There could really be 100 different answers to this. I'll give just one simple one. God could work any miracle that he wanted to, but if he wants us to become like God, if the example we saw was that you have to be a blazing light in the sky that changes people's consciousness, how would we aspire toward that? And so he comes in a recognizable form in the guru, and the guru is an enlightened being, but that guru suffers the same challenges and the same difficulties, the same heartbreaks that we do. And so the guru comes as a model to show us how to live in such a way that we too can expand our consciousness and perceive God. So as Devi said, the great power of the sun would overwhelm us. But if the power of the sun is seen as the light that comes through a window, then we can understand that. And so God comes through the window of the guru to light up the room of our consciousness.
And I just want to add as well, I think it was my perception on coming into the building today and seeing all of you who have worked so hard to create this beautiful event with the flowers everywhere and the altars and the banners and everything you've done. Honestly, I could feel how pleased Master was with all of you and how grateful he was for keeping his light strong and present for all to come and take part of it. So thank you.
We are blessed to even have this opportunity, Deviji and Deviji. That actually brings us to the last question that we had, which relates to what you have said, that how do we actually live for our Guru and the gods? How do we live for our Guru and gods, as you have said? So the question is that what is it that we could do that would please our gurus? And from their point of view, what could we do so that we can become, in some sense, the disciple that they want us to be? We have seen examples of Master being guided by Babaji, then he went to the West to take the teaching. We've seen examples of Swamiji dedicating his whole life to our gurus. So, what can we do so that we get also inspired to serve in such an expansive and such a dedicated manner?
Well, I'll give you a very hard assignment. How can you best please the Guru? Live in joy. That alone would be most pleasing to the Guru. How can you live in joy? By living in joy. You know, it's almost like a trick question. Swami Kriyananda one time gave a whole series of lectures throughout America. He called them the Joy Tours. But one of the central themes was joy is the method. It's the solution, not the reward. So you don't grimly go about your life hating this and forcing yourself to do that. Finally, you get to the end and then you feel joyful as a reward for all your hard effort. Joy is the solution. You work with joy, you live with joy, you have your relationships with joy, or take one of the other aspects of God. Joy is one, love is the other. Master said that he lived with three aspects of God in particular: wisdom, love, and joy. Well, wisdom is a little harder to come by, but love and joy is as free as the oxygen in the air. Just take it into your life, feel it, live with it, and give it to others. And that will please God and Guru more than all the grim effort that we could make.
There was a disciple of Master who was handicapped. He had, I believe it was multiple sclerosis, and his body was quite twisted. And there was another disciple at the time who was kind of an arrogant man, had self-importance. And one time the arrogant man was sitting next to Master, and this crippled man walked by, and Master commented, God is very pleased with him. His devotion has pleased God. And this arrogant man said, well, it must be a very simple kind of devotion. And Master said, oh yes, that's what pleases God the most. And so simplicity of heart, living in joy, making the choice moment by moment, day by day. Sometimes I stop and think, God gives me 100 opportunities every day to choose him, to be negative or be positive, to be judgmental or to be forgiving, to be energetic or to be lazy. We're always faced every day with hundreds of choices, and not tension, like, oh, what am I, but just always realize that we have the free will to choose the higher path. And if we say, God, nothing is going to deter me from making the choice that leads to thee, I think that's what pleases God the most.
Thank you so much, Deviji and Jyotishji. When you really put it so well, simplicity and joy, and so much depth that you bring us with these two things to all of us. So we are really blessed, and thank you so much for this question and answer session. And now we'll pass on to Pranita. Pranita will now take us to a very special session again.
I always get the special bits. Thank you, Nitendra. Jyotishji and Deviji. Joy, love, and wisdom is what we have all been living through for the past several hours that we've had you here. It is so encouraging to hear from you that a life in God and the Gurus just helps us to open the floodlights of inspiration. And who better exemplifies that inspiration than Jyotish and Deviji themselves through their beautiful creations, their books, their blogs, Jyotishji's beautiful paintings, which are spiritual teachings. Last year, we at Ananda Sangha had put together what we call a collection of Jyotishji's beautiful paintings and called it a book. A year on, that collection of images now has a soul. Jyotishji's meditative insights on each painting has breathed new life into the book. What had a structure last year now has a soul. We'd like to invite you, Jyotishji and Deviji, to be officially launching this book now. And I'd also like to invite Jitin, who has very humbly been working so hard on this effort alongside Nayaswami Lakshman and with his guidance. A warm welcome once again to all our Nayaswamis, our monks, Ishanji, Piyaji. Please join us in this special occasion.
Very, very.
The first time presented it next year, it was a total surprise. We didn't know, but now we've been working together.
It's almost impossible to keep a secret at Ananda.
Much less in India.
Much less Ananda India, but this crew did. We were thrilled. And now this is the completion of a year's worth of work.
To further celebrate this beautiful occasion, this beautiful treasure we have got in the form of a book, let's roll up a cake to also complete this. The cover of the book that you see on the standees as well is actually on the cake. And that is a miracle that the cake doesn't slip down as well. Please join me in giving a huge round of applause on this beautiful book launch as we request Jyotishji to kindly cut the cake. That's another form of joy. Thank you, Jyotishji. Thank you, Deviji. Thank you to all the Nayaswamis. We promise you we'll bring the cake at lunch.
This will show that they have good taste in art.
Thank you to all the Nayaswamis. Thank you, Ishanji, Vasudevji, Premdasji, and Piyaji for joining us on this special book launch. Thank you very much, Jyotishji and Deviji, for your words of wisdom. You have filled our hearts with more and more inspiration. Thank you once again. I'd now like to hand over to Kamal for the next section.
Thank you, Pranita. Thank you, Jyotishji and Deviji. Now, what we are going to do is watch a beautiful video created by some of in Ananda globally about masters. So let's immerse ourselves in our own master.